Well, welcome. The silly season continues. Tonight, we're going to talk to somebody who's been taking care of our children for many years and now is looking at a new role. We're looking at the role of selectman. So why don't we start with an introduction?
Good evening. My name is Mike Walsh, and I'm running for the remaining two-year seat on the Board of Selectmen.
I mean, that's one of the things I think people get confused about is the school committee, no matter how many ran, the top two got it. This is two distinct races.
It's two distinct races. There's a 3-year term and there's a two-year term. So I'm running off for the remaining 2-year term on Brian Murray's seat. And then Bill Buckley and John Erickson are running for the 3-year seat.
That's occupied by Bill Buckley.
Occupied by Bill Buckley right now, yes. And we have to make sure that in the community we get that message out, because my son was at the high school basketball game last night and fired me a text right away and said, "Dad, I'm talking to people in the stands and they still don't know that there are two distinct different races." So we've got to make sure we get that out to the selection.
And then we're trying, because again, well, this year's school committee's easy. 2 openings, 2 candidates.
Correct.
But in the years past, we had 3 or 4. It was the top 2 candidates that made it.
Well, I've always said, I ran for school committee 3 times, and all 3 times I had a race. And I said that the years after that, most people didn't have races. And here's another year where, and I'm glad they don't, because I have great respect for Joe and for Jen. But every year I ran, and here I am, my first time running for selectman.
And here you go.
And I got a race, but I enjoy it. I enjoy a race.
So we're going to start.
Yes.
Same question I've always asked you when you ran for school committee. Mike, I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you? And
I'll answer it the same way as I always do, Al. I think I bring to the board a leadership style. I bring to the board results. I can speak to results on all the boards that I've been involved in Milford. I think what's very important, though, is I'm dedicated and I care. And people ask me all the time, why when your children were out of the district and on their own did you decide to run for school committee? It's the same reason why I sit on the youth commission for 12 years now and worked hard to get the youth center renovated, because I care. I care about this community, and I can't explain it. And I always tell this story. When we first went up to Mendon at the Imperial Organization, my boss came to me and said, "Listen, we're going to find that piece of property and we're going to build that house you always wanted to build." And I said, "No." And he goes, "What do you mean, no?" I said, "I'm not leaving Milford." He says, "Why not?" And I said, "Kev, I don't know if it's Oliva's Market, Sacred Heart Church, St. Mary's Church, all the churches or the people. And I believe it's everything in this community. If you get involved, this is a great community." And I call it home.
There's a gravitational pull. Because when I think about, I grew up here.
Yeah.
Did what every Milford kid wants to do when they grow up, run away.
Yeah.
And I loved Paris, loved Washington, but when it came down to raising a family, came back to Milford.
Right. Yeah, I see it my son and daughter-in-law and grandson are up off of South Central.
How much better can you want than that?
Yeah, yeah. And he'll call me on a Friday night to ask me a question, and I'll hear a lot of commotion. I say, "What are you?" I'm down at Scioli's with a bunch of the guys. They all come back, which is a good thing, because they've all had great experiences, whether it's in the school system, in sports, in music, in art, whatever it was, and they can bring that back to this community and continue the great things that go on here.
So now, you've been involved, Youth Center.
Yep.
Milford Catholic, obviously the school committee.
Yep.
And a lot of other different pieces. Why selectmen?
I feel it's the next step for me. I feel that I can bring to the Board of Selectmen some qualities that I can work with other boards. Now, I'm not saying there's friction, but I think there are areas where the Board of Selectmen can work a little closer with other boards in town to make things better. I'm not saying that the things are bad. I would never say that about Milford at all. I think Milford is in great shape. It's managed very, very well by all the boards. But I think I just bring a little different, you know, perspective to things. I look at, like, when I first got on to the school committee, you know, it was always, everybody talked about the 4 to 3, the 4 to 3, the 4 to 3, and I'm like, I thought it was a 7-member, you know, board. And now if you look at it now, you know, everybody's pulling in the same direction to continue to, you know, make the educational process in our community better. And not that the 4 to 3 didn't, but, you know, it just, there was always differences.
But it was always one vote.
Right.
Because you almost knew that 3 on this side, it's like you watch Washington, you say the Democrats are going to vote blue, Republicans are going to vote red, and you're trying to pick up the one odd purple to make the difference.
Exactly, exactly.
The good news is we haven't heard a lot of that lately.
No, and I think that, you know, I've been fortunate enough to serve as chairman, you know, 2 years. I was elected, you know, the second year unanimously.
Is that because you did something wrong? They wouldn't let you out?
No, I think it's just because of, it's my management style, my leadership style, you know. Lead by example, you know.
I'm just kidding, but I mean, it's amazing the stress, the amount of work it takes for somebody to be chairman for 1 year.
Yeah.
Hats off to you for doing it for 2.
Well, but you know what? What you say is correct. But when you have a good group that you're working with, and I've worked with a lot of great people on the school committee, so please don't take that the wrong way. But when you're managing a good group of people, you know you're in management, makes your job a lot easier, you know. And when you have great backup, I mean, Joe Marias is he's been my co-chairman for 2 years. Anytime I just pick up the phone and he's there, it makes the job a lot easier, you know, but all the members, really. Yeah.
If you look at Milford,
yes.
What do you think the 3 biggest challenges we face are?
To me, I think number 1, stormwater management. I think middle school east is going to be a biggie. I'm not saying that this is happening right now, but at some point it's coming down the road, the high school, you know. So
there's a school coming.
Yeah, you know, not right now. I don't want anybody getting nervous about it, but at some point it's going to have to get talked about, whether it's going to be renovated or whether it's going to be a new one built. I think honestly, I think there's more than 3 concerns. I still look at, you know, we talk about it all the time, immigration. You know, where does immigration fit into that? You know, I think we still have some housing issues, some neighborhoods that need some, you know, fixing up, some tune-ups, you know. So I think there's I don't want to say a lot of things that, you know, are an issue, but I think there are things that need to be looked at, absolutely.
Well, let's take a look at some of them. You mentioned middle school east.
Yes.
Been a hot topic lately.
Yes. As you know, the school committee voted to surplus it June 30th. And the reason we're using June 30th is 2 reasons. Number 1, we agreed to keep it for 1 year to do the studies that we needed to do to determine whether we were going to keep it. And the second reason is to allow the groups that are in there right now using it, and there are a lot of groups using the gymnasium, to finish the year out. But then after that, you know, as a town, we've got to decide, are we going to sell it? Are we going to knock it down? And do we have a use for it? You know, but when you walk around inside the building, unfortunately, you realize the type of work that it needs. You know?
Oh, no matter what you do with it,
Yeah.
it's going to be millions
Right,
to renovate it.
right, right.
But I mean, is it really a question about the gym? You of all people know how badly gyms are in demand.
Absolutely, and that's one of the hardest things for us as a school committee, to surplus the building, to walk away from the building, is because we realize how hard it is to get gym space. You and I have had a conversation at the youth center with the Special Olympics. They were having trouble finding gym space, so we were able to get them into the youth center. But here we are with a group, and a very important group, that can't get any gym space, and we're giving up a gym. But
Yeah, but are we really? Do you really think we'll give up a gym as a town?
I don't. At the end of the day, I don't think so. In my heart, I don't think so. You know, but as a school department, we did not have a use for the building. But I personally see some uses for that building, and I talk about it all the time. You go into town hall, you got people sharing offices. There's no storage. You know,
Bunk desks,
Yeah.
a new concept.
you know, I'm saying, we could even, you know, the town could come back to the school department and say, hey, you know, could you take a little bit of the space? We're going to take some of the space. Could you use a little of the space? And maybe.
But we've had that discussion. The school committee's paying for 60% of that building no matter what.
Yep.
Because if you turn it over to the town, it's like all the other mortgages. We pay for it first,
Right.
and the school committee gets 62% of what's left.
Right.
So if you take 100,000 off the top, well, that's 60,000 less that we have to give to the school.
Right.
And I absolutely have always believed that just because you make it surplus doesn't mean you can't come back later
Yep.
and say, hey, we thought of a new use for it. We could really use it.
Well, you know, being involved with the building of the new Woodland School, in conversations with Aldo Chakey and Jonathan Bruce, and they brought up a great point. Years ago, we boarded up the old high school. We didn't knock it down, we boarded it up, and we kept it sealed. And then years later, we opened it, renovated it, what is now Stacy Middle School. You know, and Jonathan makes a great point. You knock it down, it's gone forever.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying we want to have an eyesore sitting in town, but do we, in fact, maybe not right now, but at some point, would we have a use for the front of the building, and should we keep the gym area running for the programs that are using it?
I can't believe we would turn off the gym.
Yep.
You know, just looking at the demand.
Oh, yeah.
You know, everything with a bitty basketball on up.
It's everything. We got wrestling in there. We got the youth cheerleaders are in there. They're trying to get some time at the youth center. I mean, when you're standing at the youth center at night, coming out of a meeting, and you see the cars going in and out of the driveway at Middle School East, that gym's being used.
So the real question becomes, we know there's a school coming. Milford High School,
at some point,
74, it was completed.
Yep.
She's weathered well, but it's been 40 plus years.
Well, I think one thing that the town of Milford did, which was a great move, is that we used to build these, not just schools, we used to build any building, and we did nothing to them for 30 to 35.
They fell apart.
They fell apart, and then we ended up building a new one. When the town of Milford hired the facilities manager,
Rob Quinn,
that was a great move, because now what he did was he went in and fixed what needed to be fixed on the schools, got everything working the way it's supposed to be working, and now he maintains. The auditorium at the high school was redone. You know, he makes sure that every school is kept up to par so that we don't get 25 or 30 years down the road and the thing's just falling apart.
I mean, realistically, and I remember when we hired Rob Quinn, I was on the selection committee. I had one hesitation. I said, when somebody figures out how good this guy is, can we keep him?
Right.
I'm so happy that my concern never came to fruition, that somebody scarfed him.
Right.
He has just been heaven sent.
Yeah, and I say to anybody, I have, whenever I get into a school with Rob, particularly going back to the high school again, and he'll take the time to walk you around and show you all the things that had needed to be repaired when he got here that weren't even working. They were just shut off, valves turned off, whatever. He got all those repairs done and everything working, and now he's in what we call the maintain mode, you know, and that's how you do it to your home. I say to people all the time, every year you're doing something in your house, whether it's painting the outside or a new driveway, or so if you do it to your home, why as a taxpayer aren't you doing it to your own buildings?
Well, when you think about Woodland, it was 10 years prior we started saying, there's a school coming.
Right.
And we saved up, and I'm really proud to say we didn't have to use profanity and those words of 2.5 override or debt exclusion.
Right, right.
Aren't we in the same position with the high school?
As far as?
We better start saving now for 8 years.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And then through this process, you know, while we're saving, we've got to decide whether it's going to be a renovation or is it going to be a rebuild.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, when we talked about Woodland, I laughed. And I said, okay, when we did Brookside, half the size of Woodland, we basically built half a school to take care of the 300-odd cherubs.
Right.
And I said, 700 at Woodland? Yeah. Where are we going to put them?
Where are you going to put them? And that's what the school committee talks about. 1,100 at the high school. Where are you going to put them?
I mean, you think of the high school.
Yeah.
It's not like you could just build it in the back lot and rebuild it at $150 million.
Yeah, we were talking the other night, and I don't know if this number's factual or not, but at school committee we were talking, that building's so big, the high school's so big, the roof is like 5 square miles, the roof. I mean, that's a big building.
Well, that was $4 million to just do the roof back when.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, my heart, do I believe we'll build a new high school? No. But renovate it? You know, what else can we do?
Yeah. Even if we built a new one, where would you put it?
Well, that's my point.
Right. There are people that say go into the back field. It's not big enough to do it out back.
That was my point. Where are you going to put it?
Right.
I mean, you can't. Woodland was hard enough.
Right.
But Woodland may have 100 less children.
Right.
But when you think of all of the space that you need for a high school.
Yeah. I still say, though, Al, what makes no sense to me, and I talk about this all the time, we built Woodland School to max, and that was by mandate from the state. You know, I said, why don't we build it for 1,200 children? They said, you can't. You have to build it to capacity. So it's at capacity, 989 students. You know, it makes no sense to me, but there's got to be people farther up that can figure it out.
I think it's something about 52% reimbursement. You know, that if we want 30 million from them, we got to do what they say.
Oh, absolutely. That's why a lot of people don't know. That's why it's called the cafetorium. They won't fund an elementary school that has an auditorium. So we built a cafetorium, and they were okay with that.
It's really a cafeteria.
Right.
Oh, no, look, we can use it for an auditorium.
Yeah, it's a very nice cafetorium.
No, I could see it, and that's always the question for Middle School East, because I've always believed that we're going to slice and dice it to where the town municipal takes a chunk.
Yep.
Central office, community use, you know, different places where you don't need the same level of security as the high school. I mean, to get to Lenny Moore Cone, people are saying you need papal decree.
Right.
And I say, thank God. The last thing I'd want to see is security lessened or lowered in our school.
Well, I don't know if you ever heard this story. 2 years ago, for Special Olympics Day, Jen Walsh had reached out to the Patriots, and the Patriots sent a former player down. I can't think of his name, but he's as big as the side of a house, and they forgot to let the security person at the front door know. And he walked in and he said, hi, my name is so-and-so, I'm from the Patriots, and I'm here to give the awards away at Special Olympics. And the security person in the kiosk looked at her clipboard. She said, I'm very sorry, I don't have your name. He said, well, I'm a former Patriots player, I'm here to give away the awards for Special Olympics. And she said, well, that's very nice, but unfortunately, if you're
not on the list,
I can't let you in. And so they finally got a hold of Meg Balsito down in the field. She came up, and she actually apologized to him, and he said, please do not apologize to me. This is a system that worked. He said, think about that woman in that kiosk, and I'm telling her I'm a former New England Patriots
I'm 3 times her size, and she's standing up to me.
And she could have very easily said, oh, okay, hit the button and let me go. She said, if I'm not on her list and my identification does not match her list, they're not coming in. And that's how secure the Milford schools are.
And that is the right way.
Absolutely.
I mean, we wouldn't want to have any child endangered.
Right.
To any degree.
No. But you talk about, you know, could you bring some office space from the town hall over? You mentioned getting central office out of the high school. Your central office doesn't belong in the high school, and that used to be, you remember you went there, that was the nurses' station that we converted into central office. So could you get central office out of there? How about getting the little ones out of the basement?
Well,
you know, could we get them out of the basement? You know, so there's a lot, in my opinion, there's a lot of uses for the town of Milford. And that's the way I would look at it. And I agree with you.
And I'm saving you from questions about the long-range ed plan, because that's not going to be yours right now.
That's right.
I mean, when you talk about departments and boards working together, I always am amazed, the selectmen and the school committee. Most of the selectmen came from the school committee at one point.
Correct.
I think all 3 did.
As of right now, yes.
All 3 did.
All 3 did, yes.
So, you know, you sit there and say, talk about a natural bridge. It seems that people start at the school committee and then move over to selectmen, and you get a good cross-section of...
Well, what happens to you, Al, is when you first get on the school committee, you know, your first year you're in a learning curve, but once once you really get going, you realize, and it's the largest budget within the town of Milford.
$60 million.
Yeah, so it's the largest budget, but now what happens is you start to develop relationships because you're working with the finance committee, you're working occasionally with the board of selectmen. When you're building a school, you're working with the planning board, the zoning board, and so you learn how to maneuver around all these boards. So it's really if you were going to run for selectman, it's a great proving ground, because now what happens is you really fine-tune your skills. In my case, I've been through 3 teacher contract negotiations, so you learn how to negotiate with people, and you get a good education to make the next step. Because you're lucky enough to get to selectman, now you're over 100 million, and now you get all the departments in town.
Right. Now, you mentioned immigration.
Yes.
Comments?
I feel that I have a concern. I have a concern that and when I say immigration, I don't like it when people use the Ecuadorian community, because to me, immigration is immigration, and there's a lot of different nationalities.
Wait a minute, Michael. The Ecuadorians, what are they? They're the new Guatemalans, who are the new Brazilians, who are the new Italians, who are the new Irish.
Right.
It's just their turn.
That's what I say. And if they're here legally, then we have an obligation to educate. We have an obligation to help. Because if you go to Stacy Middle School every year when they throw their Cultures of the World, and there's over 65 different cultures in that school, and every single parent that you walk up to and try to have a conversation with all their country colors on and everything like that, they say to me all the time, we came to America for 2 reasons and 2 reasons only: a better way of life and to educate our children. And that goes back to the beginning of time, and so I say it's to me it's important. You've got to be legal, you've got to do it properly, and then we're here to help. And if you don't, then unfortunately you've got to obey the law. And what happens, is if you get unfortunately deported because you're not here legally, well, get yourself straightened out and come back legally. I tell people all the time, go to the Statue of Liberty and read the bottom of it. That's what America is all about.
And a lot of us, if you read the sides, my mother's name's there, my father's name's there.
Yeah.
There's a sense of pride that, like you say, my grandfather came over in the 30s, followed by my mother came to Milford 41.
Yeah.
Legal. Put their heads down and worked, mom in Drapers as a drill press operator.
Yeah.
Followed the rules. The only reason I got a chance to go to school and all is because they worked so hard.
Yeah, and I find, and the reason I use the word education, there's a great story. There's a pediatrician, and I believe he was or still is at the Fallon, which has been now renamed, but he lives in Franklin. And he'd be driving home at night, and he would see the Ecuadorian woman carrying children that he would say is a pediatrician. He said, that child's like 2 years old. So he did a little bit of research, and he found out that where they come from in Ecuador is very mountainous. So they're taught as young women to always carry the children. I believe he, with the help of St. Mary's Church, put together a program where it's okay, you got one in the stroller, put the bigger one and let them walk behind. And now, interesting as this is, when you're driving down Main Street at night and you see a young Ecuadorian family, dad's got one by the hand and he's walking, it's through education. It's through education. Teach them our culture.
Well, think about it. When my father came over, he had gotten his 4 years of school in northern Portugal. That's all you got. Then you went out and you started working.
Right.
The only reason I didn't go to school for 4 years and got to go the whole gamut was that my family came over here and were given a chance.
Right.
But it's always funny because you hear, okay, if you're a selectman, how are you going to fix immigration? You can't deport them to Rhode Island.
Right.
Whether they're legal or not.
Right.
Immigration, I believe, is still a national, federal issue.
National and state. You got to work on it. Is what you got to do. You got to work together. to try and correct the problem.
Stormwater.
Yes, big project, $45 million. I'm going to tell you honestly, I don't agree with it. I know there's a lot of people that don't agree with it. What I don't like is, and I've been dealing with this for years as a young, kid in high school working in gas stations, and you remember they were all dirty,
Right.
and the EPA came out and said either they shut you down or you had to haul all the dirt all the way to Tonawanda, New York, and nobody questioned anybody on anything. And then all of a sudden one day somebody said, well, why can't we put that dirt on the side of the building, cover it with plastic, and every so often flip it with a backhoe because gasoline evaporates, and then we can put it back in the ground. So all the millions and billions of dollars were spent either closing down service stations, digging up service stations, and hauling all this supposed hazardous waste out to this site in New York. At the end of the day, they figured out they could have kept it local. I have the same concerns with the stormwater management. I see this, they come out they've got the town of Milford, the town of Franklin.
Milford, Franklin, Bellingham, you're our guinea pigs.
Exactly, and so now we're gonna have to spend all this money, and what I fear is that 10 years down the road, after we do this, okay, they're gonna say, well, that really wasn't necessary, we found another way to do it. And you'll hear people actually say that one of the concerns they have with the EPA is they don't really answer to another agency. And that's another problem. So when you're trying to have a conversation with them about stormwater management, they're just saying.
But when I watched John Fernandez trying to spearhead legislation that said, wait a minute, the easiest way to stop the phosphate issue is at the source.
Right.
Don't try and catch it downstream after it's been diluted. Why can't we just tell people you can't use them anymore? Like you say, after so many years, the problem will correct itself.
Right.
And then I saw some of the big fertilizer companies, 80% of the fertilizer doesn't contain phosphates anymore. To me, sounds like a much better way of dealing with it.
Right.
Because one bag upstream is easy to control.
Right.
Let that get into the aquifer, and
Right.
now, you got $45 million.
Well, and the other thing that you don't really see anybody talking about it, like, we didn't just start using fertilizer on our lawns 3 years
It was
ago.
only 2 years ago, right? They invented fertilizer.
I mean, we've been using fertilizer on our lawns forever, so now it's an issue? And I'm not saying that it's something that shouldn't be looked at. I'm not saying that, but a $45 million issue?
But see, there's the practicality when you sit there and say, wait a minute, guys, our entire budget is $100 million. You want us to spend almost half of our entire budget on this project?
Right. Right.
Yeah,
and that's not fair, and it makes no sense.
And why just Milford, Franklin, Bellingham?
Correct. Because we're on the Charles River?
Because we're at the end of it's like, okay, whose leg did we urinate on to get them mad at us?
Right.
There's a lot more towns upstream.
How about the town of Medfield? How about the town of Millis? How about the town of Dover, where it flows right through? It's the midsections, but it's flowing through those towns. They're not using fertilizer?
Big projects. We're
Yes.
talking one big one coming up, the water company.
The water company.
Comments?
Scares me. And I'll tell you why. And I talk very openly about this. I feel very comfortable about the plan because the majority of the plan has been renovated. But what makes me very, very nervous are the pipes that are underground. And Al, as well as anybody, you go on Upper Congress Street and you burst a big main and you open up that road, and the next thing you know, you see a gas main that's not right and you see some electrical that's not right. You're going to be ripping that road up and you're going to be replacing everything just like they're doing down on 109 in Medway right now. You're going to have the same thing. Yeah, people may say we're going to crack the road and fix the little pipe, but what if you get up there, some of these older streets over in Hale and things like that, where these pipes could be 100 years old for all we know. Okay, and we're going to rip that street up. That's going to become Milford taxpayer, expense. I say, Mike Walsh, personally, I'd rather leave it in the hands of the water company, and if they give me a little rate hike, you know what? I personally would take the little rate hike over, you're going to spend $63 million to buy it. What happens down the road? you know?
But what do you say to people when they say, okay, if that pipe burst, water company would fix it, but then they charge you their profit margin above it?
Wouldn't you rather have that than having to appropriate huge amounts of money to have the repairs done?
Either way, you'd have to, right?
You're gonna, but I think the burden would be less to the taxpayer, and that's just my opinion.
Sure.
If it stays a private entity, you know, because think about it. Now you take it over. Now you got a department. So now you got another department. You got payroll. You know, who's going to supervise it? You know, you got your medical insurance. You got everything that comes along with having employees, and you know, is it going to go from 15 employees to 20 employees? Is it?
I hope not.
You know, those are the kind of things that really, and I haven't seen the study, but.
Well, we can't yet.
Right.
And I think that's probably the biggest concern people have.
Yeah.
Is I can't be for it or against it till I see it.
Right.
And
right.
at this point, we haven't been able to see it yet.
Right.
Because of the municipal purchasing process.
Right. But what makes me nervous is that if we were to purchase it, like I say, I feel very comfortable about the plant. It's everything else if it starts to fail, you know, and that's going to fall on the taxpayers.
Speaking of the taxpayers, profanity.
Yes.
Prop 2 override to me is profanity.
Yeah.
Debt exclusion. But if somebody was to ask you,
In
your position.
My 30 years of being in Milford, I don't think I've ever seen it. The town is managed so properly. I don't think I won't say never, but I'd be hard pressed to see it. And I don't think, to be honest with you, I don't think it would even go at town meeting. I really don't, unless there was some really, really important project that people really got behind and felt that it was warranted.
I mean, Michael, let's face it, if we had 2 or 3 buildings, a tornado come through.
Yeah, that's a different circumstance.
You know, wipes out our stabilization, wipes out
Right.
everything else, well,
Right.
then you deal with it like we always have.
Right, but if things continue the way that they are in Milford going, I would not be in favor of it, no, because it's not necessary. You bring me, like you said, you bring me a catastrophic problem that I have to take to town meeting and sell it, then I've got to take it to town meeting and I got to sell it because we've got a catastrophic problem and we've got to handle it, you know. But with what's going on in the town of Milford right now, I mean, and you and I spend a lot of time together between school committee and finance committee, and we're in great shape, you know, because of a lot of good people who have worked very hard.
I've always said, I think what separates Milford from all the towns around us are the pride and the passion that people have
Right.
for their departments. You know, and you're coming off the school committee. I remember years ago when we had a real problem budget-wise. I was reading about all these towns around us that deferred their raises. I didn't understand that. If I can't pay my mortgage today, deferring part of it and making me pay twice the increase in a year, I don't know how that works.
Right.
But Milford teachers, for a year, said they'd take no raise. They gave up their raises to keep the teachers from being laid off.
That was my first year on the school committee. That was the year we had stimulus money, if you remember.
Yep.
The teachers came in at 0. They said, we want to keep everybody employed. And we got to the point where, and you remember, you were on the finance committee, we originally had 18 names, and the finance committee said to us, no, we got to work together. We're going to keep everybody employed. So the finance committee, the school committee, the teachers association, we all worked together, and we got down to one person, and that was our high school football coach, who might end up being a elementary school gym teacher. But again, everybody working together, we worked it out. But the first year on, they took a 0.
Right.
So when we went into the next contract, we figured that the teachers association was going to come in heavy because they had taken a 0 their first year. They didn't. They negotiated with us. You know, it was important that everybody stay employed. And we knew as a school committee, we had to step up a little bit.
And it really, in my mind, wasn't keeping people employed. We're not an employment agency, but it was keeping the program staffed.
Right.
Because if we had to cut, I remember that year, if we had to cut 6 or 8 or 10 people, programs were going away.
Right.
You know, so the impetus was, okay, these programs are important to us.
Right.
How do we keep the staff to maintain them?
Right.
But, you know, you got to give credit to the union.
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
Not a lot of unions that turn around and say, we're going to go back to our members and say, got to bite the bullet this year.
Yep.
If we want to keep, because a lot of unions are known for eating their young.
Right. Right.
And ours didn't.
No. No, they don't. They don't. And they do a really good job of strategically placing people from different schools on the committee so that every school has got a voice, you know. And we went even as far as at the end of this one, we made a recommendation for the next teacher's contract, because the nurses are in the teacher's contract. We want to make sure that there's a nurse on the committee as well, so that they have a voice, you know. And but they do a really, really nice job. And you know, the bargaining that we do, you know, sometimes when it first starts, you say to yourself, we're never going to get anywhere. But you know what? As you go through the process, you can just see it unfolding, and you're like, you know, this at the end of the day, this is really going to work out for everybody, and it does.
But isn't that, I mean, you talk about the Milford way.
Yeah.
You know, you come in, we bang our chest saying we're broke, we're destitute, the town is dying.
Right.
School committee starts with the mating ritual of, oh no, we need a 50% increase or we can't educate anybody.
Right.
Then we all laugh and we sit there and say, okay,
yeah,
what's realistic?
Right.
What can we do?
Right.
And somehow, I don't remember a floor fight from any department.
No.
You know,
No.
it just,
No.
one way or another,
Yep.
it works out.
And you know, and how that, what's very important about that too is, and Dr. Tremblay was very good at it, and Kevin is very good at it, is when we're behind the scenes as a school committee and we're pushing for certain things, you know, Dr. Tremblay, you know, would always say, wait a minute, we really, really want to go to town meeting with FinCom behind us. And some members would say, well, you know what, if we don't, we don't. We're going. And he says, no, let's keep going through the process. We got time, but let's keep the lines of communication, you know, open. In my 8 years of being on the school committee, I've never once gone before town meeting without the FinCom standing up in favor. And I know school committees before me say the same thing. But again, it's through communication. And you asked me, one of the things that I think that I will bring to the board is that. Is, you know, what you say is everybody gets in the room and beats their chest and says, okay, now wait a minute, let's sit down.
Yeah.
Let's talk about
Okay, we've
this.
done that.
Yeah.
You know, you've made your point, we've made ours. Now,
Let's talk about
let's
it.
talk about it and see what's realistic.
Right, exactly.
You know, you can't have a 10%.
No.
You can't live with a 0%.
Right,
So the last few years has been 3.5, and
right,
it's what we can afford.
right.
But somehow it always seems to work.
Yeah, and I think, and I'm going to use this as an example, another great example of that is, I remember when we went before the Finance Committee for the Youth Center, and I think it was, we were talking, I think it was the AC? It was something about in the Youth Center we were talking about, and you said, the Finance Committee said, listen, you can't do that. You got to follow protocol. You can't just throw something.
Yeah, it was the air conditioner.
Because, and you brought up a great point, the poor senior center didn't get a $7,500 room for that reason. And we got to be fair to everybody. So you got to get back to the back of the line. And you know what, at the end of the day, Brian and I walked out of the room and said, you know what, they're 100% right. We can't do that. I mean, there's other departments in town that are sitting on the list. Why should we working
Plus
together?
now, we made a commitment to town meeting that we would be transparent with all the articles.
Right.
I mean, you just went through it when I said, okay, 5 questions. Where's my package answering for
Right.
every project? 5 questions. So that way, a month before town meeting, I can put them up on the website.
Right.
Now, any town meeting member that says, I didn't really have time to read that article, it's kind of hard to
Right.
support them when it's up a month early.
Right.
Or any resident. I mean, legitimate
Yeah.
concern is, wait a minute, you're spending how much of my money? On what? Why? So little by little, it seems to be working out better and better every year.
Well, I think that's key, Al, and I also think what's key is the presentation that's done at the beginning of town meeting by the Finance Committee. Because by the time you put it on the website and by the time that explanation is done at town meeting, you should have a pretty good understanding as the articles are being read, you know, what you want to buy and what you don't want to buy, you know.
Now, as we look at town government, we've made some changes from an organizational perspective.
And what do you?
Moving treasurer.
Oh, yes.
Do you see any changes if you had the magic wand? Do you see any major changes you'd make in town government organization?
Well, I think the move with the finance director was a great move. I think putting everything under the jurisdiction of one manager, I think was great. I don't know where else you could do that, you know, right now, because you look at your building department is separate, you know, public health is separate, you know, you get your Veterans Affair. I mean, how would you merge those? You know, could you possibly do something with maybe taxes and treasurer? I don't know. I think it would just muddy the waters. I think Milford Town Hall, I think, is managed very well. I really do. You know, I don't think you would. I couldn't think right now off the top of my head of a department that I thought I could merge with another department.
We got a new program in Milford, the bus.
Yes.
Comments?
100% behind it, and I'm going to tell you why. Having a wife who's been spending a lot of time in Dana-Farber over the last 5 weeks, I'm spending a lot of time there myself, and I see a lot of people getting dropped off at Milford Hospital in Dana-Farber with the use of that bus. And I know it makes a lot of other stops, but one of the big push for that bus was Milford Hospital, because they knew they had a need to get their patients to that hospital. And if I'm not mistaken now, they wrote a check for $75,000. So when you sit there on a daily basis and you watch those people, and some of them really need to get to the hospital, and they're using that bus, but even around town, you see more and more people riding the bus. It's another means of communication for people to get around town.
Well, we just saw a letter written by Jen Walsh.
Yes.
Saying that her group, the special needs students, may have low numbers, but her comment was maybe low numbers, but it's very high impact.
Right.
That some of these kids don't drive.
Right.
So for them to get to their jobs,
right,
the bus is pretty critical.
Right. Right.
You know, so it'll be interesting to see what happens.
I think you can't, I think it's one of those programs, Al, that you can't, if you're going to judge it by every time it drives by you and it's not full, that's not how you can judge it. And Jen makes a valid point. You have to judge it by who are the people that are getting to Dana-Farber for treatment on their own, okay? Who are the people that are able to get to Milford Hospital for testing in the emergency department or to visit somebody in the hospital on their own? Who are the people that are able to, who's the elderly person that's able to get out of Birmingham Court or their private home, get to a stop to get to Milford Town Hall to pay their taxes, get dropped off to get groceries? That's what you got to look at. So it's not, is the bus full, is the bus being used? That's
well,
the key.
I mean, I remember when Bill Buckley brought up, he said there'll be different metrics we use. I said, well, there's three I can think of: ridership, ridership, ridership.
Right.
Not an absolute number, but
right,
the ridership, is it really serving the needs of Milford?
Of the community.
Versus a Milford Uber, you know, like having extra vans at the senior center and, you know, charging somebody $1 or whatever to be picked up.
Right, right.
And I don't know that we can, because again, I went out on a limb when I said, somebody said, well, after 90 days we can evaluate it. I said, then cancel it.
Yeah.
You're never going to, I mean,
Never,
you think
no.
about where you're working.
Right.
If you put in a new program and they say, Michael, we're going to judge the service program on 90 days. Why bother?
Right, don't even roll it out.
You know, by the time it starts to gain some legs, you're going to evaluate it.
Right.
And, you know, I remember Mike Suarez brought us the first quarter results, and it was like $40 a ride. 6-month results were down to $24 a ride. So you sit there and say, okay, it's still very expensive, but it's only 6 months in.
Yep.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah, give it time. Give it time. Give it time for word to spread, you know, and the need's going to change. You know, the need is going to change, you know, so that'll drive your numbers up, you know. But when you see it in operation, and again, Mike Walsh's opinion, it's definitely needed in the town of Milford. It's a major plus for the people in the town of Milford.
Well, if we can help people who don't drive,
right?
If we can help special needs adults and kids who need that bus.
Yep.
I mean, you think about it. You've been involved with enough youth organizations that the kids who come from single-parent families, I mean, you know, think of the Walsh house. Could you keep up with your children? I mean, we had 3 against 2, counting my mother, and we barely could keep up with 2 girls.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
Can you imagine if you only had 1 parent?
Right.
So, to me, if we can give a little extra help to those parents who need it.
And we do, and that's why, you know, Al, you've heard me say for the longest time, especially now that it's been renovated, stop in the youth center at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and look at the children that are in there, whether they're in there for after-school programs, whether they're in there just to vent, whether they're in there to play sports, whether they're in there to do homework. But it's even gone out in the community now, because now we have a gentleman who's a retired engineer. He comes in and tutors math classes. I mean, I went upstairs and I know him from the dealerships, and here he is. He's got groups of round tables, and he's got 4 or 5 kids at each table, and he's walking around tutoring them in math. I mean, we have another woman that comes in and does art programs with them. Okay, if they didn't have the youth center, where would they be at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? You know, so you're right. If we can, as a town, make a difference, then we need to make a difference. You know, and I've said this on your show before. My grandfather had a great saying: as you travel through life, there will be people less fortunate than you. Turn around and pick them up. You know, and that's what we do a great job of in this town. And yeah, do some people feel that people take advantage of us? Probably, but the majority are very thankful for everything they get from the town of Milford on a daily basis.
But that comes up, I mean, I've heard that a couple times, because I've taken heat, where they say, because you have all these kids programs, people from out of town come in and take advantage of them. I know what I answered. What would you say?
Well, I would say that we definitely make sure that the Milford kids are taken care of before we allow any outside, you know, community to come into the town of Milford. So I know for a fact that the Milford Youth Center, we enforce it. We even have special fee structuring for Milford programs. I know with the Fields Project up the high school, it's the same, being on the school committee. So the Milford community always comes first before we allow an outside entity to come in, and the outside entity, if they're renting something, pays a bigger fee.
But you know, I've laughed because I've said, you know, if the worst thing we have is that in serving Milford kids, we happen to help a couple kids from other towns.
Yeah, that's the big deal.
Exactly. I think I can live with that.
Yeah.
I hope that's the worst thing I'm accused of when I hopefully take the bus ride north, not south, for the ultimate ride.
Yeah.
You know, okay, so you're taking care of Milford kids, and you happen to help some other kids along the way.
Well, what it does, Al, in my opinion, is it helps things grow, because those young adults are going to become adults, and someday, you know, they'll be lucky enough to have children, and they may be in a community somewhere where they say, you know what, I used to play in this place, or I used to play on this field. You know what, I got an idea. Let's see, and they can improve their own community.
Programs in Milford, anything specifically you would expand, add, if you had the gun and the bullets to make the choice?
Right now, sitting here, I would have to say no. I mean, the programs, I'm going to go right back to the high school as far as education goes. I cannot believe the programs that are offered in Milford High School, as far as the math programs, the language programs, the science program, the biology. I mean, it's just what we do in music and art in this town for the kids at all levels. I mean, the sports programs, I mean, they're just, no, I don't, I think, you know, lacrosse, I go on and name them all, you know.
If you're successful, you're going to be on the other side of the school choice question, where all of a sudden your budget general government
Gets
is going to be
affected
paying
by
it out,
Mm-hmm.
but school committee gets it paid in.
Mm-hmm.
So they get the gazinta, you get the gazauda.
Right.
Now what do you say?
The key factor to that, though, Alan, you know this, is to increase the incoming school choice. And that's an area where I think a selectman, especially a former school committee selectman, could work very closely with the existing school committee to say, instead of pointing fingers at school choice, saying, you know, what can we do together to improve our incoming students? And I want you to understand, I understand you're getting the in, but I'm writing the check for the out, and I'd like to write the check for the out to be a little bit less. So I need you as a school committee to help me do that. Give me some ideas of what you think that we can do to improve that. And one of the ways of doing that might be as simple as a survey. You know, the town of Hopedale, the town of Hopkinton, you know, they go out and say, why aren't you considering coming to Milford? Maybe it is a program that we're not offering, you know. But I will say this, and you saw this, last year, the marketing committee of the school committee started marketing Milford High School. And we did it again this year, but what we did is we came down, brought a group of seniors down to 8th grade for a day, walking around with all the students. Then we took all the students up to the high school for a day. Then we had the parents up there. The parents were amazed it was offered at the high school. They didn't even know half the stuff that was being offered. So we started marketing them, and you saw the numbers. I think it was last year, was it 30% less going out, leaving the school district? And that was the first year that we did it. Those kind of things working together, I think are important.
And I remember the good Dr. Ligor came on, and when we asked him, why should I vote for you? One of the things he said is, I got a marketing background. I'm going to market our schools.
Yep.
So I was very pleased to see
Yeah.
that the marketing program not only is implemented,
Yes.
but is making progress.
And Jim works very close with Peter Boucher, the athletic director. So now when you walk around the high school, they have Hawk of the Week. They have in the
leadership.
Yeah, the leadership. They have these on the corridors. They take these nice photographs of students and they put them up and they change them. You come into the front, you got the banners hanging off the light poles now, top 100, you know.
But see, there was a guy that came on the show for the first time, new athletic director, and he won me over when he said, we have student athletes.
Right.
Not athletes who are pretending to be interested in academics.
Right.
And I said, okay, this guy's got his head on straight.
Yeah.
You know, 99.99% of the super athletes in Milford will not make a career out of it.
Right.
We'll get one here, one there.
Right. That's correct.
So preparing them for academics to get into good colleges has to be a priority.
Absolutely. And another key thing that he does is every year he brings a gentleman in that does a leadership training for the captains on all the
Leadership
sports.
Academy
The
thing.
Leadership Academy, okay? That this is how you act and behave as a captain on and off the field, or in and out of the gym, or whatever it is, the pool, okay? And the players will follow you. And this kind of behavior is unacceptable, whether it's in school or at an
Well, he
event.
made a point to say he's wearing his Milford shirt.
Right,
So whether he's in the school or not, it says Milford.
right,
And whatever behavior that you're involved in
right,
is going to reflect on Milford.
right.
That's a pretty profound statement to make to a teenager.
Right.
I mean, let's face it, we were always perfect when we were teenagers. But, you know, that's a life lesson.
Right.
Because, you know, let's face it, everybody knows what you do at Imperial.
Mm-hmm.
If you go out and display less than professional behavior, Kevin's affected.
Right.
Just like the school's affected if you're wearing a Milford High t-shirt and you're behaving less than properly.
Absolutely.
So, you know, again, my hats are off when I see people teaching our children life lessons
Right.
that can help them all along.
Yep, that's important, and I say to parents all the time, I don't care what your child or son or daughter is involved in the school district, but whatever that program is exactly what you said, Al, is that they're teaching life lessons. You know, you're gonna get knocked down. You gotta get up. You know, somebody's not gonna agree with you. That's okay. How do you handle yourself when someone doesn't agree with you? Those are life's lessons. You know, you're not always gonna win. How are you gonna handle it? Are you gonna be a good sport when you walk away? Somebody's gonna beat you at a chess game, someone's gonna beat you at a swimming match, you're gonna go over and shake their hand and say, nice job.
Well, I mean, you were one of the people that turned the youth center around.
Yep.
Because many, oh God, now I'm dating myself, more than a decade and a half ago.
Yep. I'd say, yeah, 12 years at least.
They
yep.
came in, the board came in and didn't understand why certain people, me, Shano, a couple others, wouldn't support them.
Right.
And we told them point blank, you keep telling me the youth center is only for at-risk children. I hate the idea
yep.
of labeling a child, because I only found out then that where I came from in the Heights, we were part of the bad side of town.
Right.
I didn't know Milford was big enough to have a good and a bad side. But I was very happy that nobody ever told me I was one of the bad kids.
Yeah.
Because, you know, that label, and we always said, until you're all-inclusive, not interested in supporting any organization.
I say all the time, what is a bad kid?
Well, that's, but now, I mean, I look at that youth center, and it's more, I grew up playing ball hockey there. You know, my daughters grew up going to dances there. It seems like the new board, if you can call the new board, the last decade's board,
yeah.
has really taken the youth center to be a Milford organization.
Oh, definitely. Most definitely. But you know what, Al, I got to make this point. We couldn't have done it without the support of the people in Milford.
Sure.
There's no doubt about it. You know, we put the plan together, but that plan wouldn't have gone anywhere if it wasn't for the people in the great community of Milford who supported it.
So, Michael, I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
I go back again. I think that I'm going to bring to the board, not that there is not good leadership, not that there isn't style on the board. I think that the style and the leadership and the dedication and the drive that someone like Mike Walsh can bring to that board, I think that I can really make some differences.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And as always, I'll say it again, I'll never ask you to vote for any specific candidate, not my place. But I'll beg you to get to know the candidates. Pick one that you believe will lead this town. And then I'm really begging you, get out on April 4th and vote. It's the most powerful thing you can do. So thank you for everything you've done, everything you will do. Good night to our 6 loyal viewers. Maybe a couple Walshes thrown in, so maybe we're up to 8. May God bless. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Thanks.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just searching for my soul.